So we're going to start off with the Mike Vrabel discussion. His name is thrown around. He currently works. Is he like an analyst or something for the Browns? He's still around.
Consultant is his official name these days.
All-time great linebacker for the Patriots. I thought, had a decent stint as the head coach at Tennessee for the Titans. It did not end very well. That's still a topic of discussion of should they have gotten rid of him or not. Won some games there. They were in, they made the playoffs, I believe, under him. So he's a Belichick disciple. He's one of the only guys didn't coach for Belichick, I don't think. Maybe he did. But played for him, was able to have success as a head coach. I've watched him on podcasts. He seems like an awesome guy. Gets guys to play hard. He understands the rule book. He understands how to find loopholes, just like Belichick did. So his name is thrown around just because for the Bears, the question is going to be: do you hire somebody that's a good coordinator and they come in to be a head coach, or do you want somebody that can come in and just be a head coach? Right? I don't know. I don't believe he called defense or anything. I think he was just kind of the head coach guy to make sure everything's going well. Because Kevin Warren them said that they're going to look for somebody that's a leader of men, and that's and part of me is like, well, no shit, you want them to be a leader of men. That's what a head coach does,
right? I mean, I hope to God that's what you're hiring. You can't hire a best pal.
No,
that does not work. You can't hire a yes man buddy guy,
right? So if that's your definition, that's why his name's been thrown around. So let's talk about Mike Vrabel. Would he be a good fit to be hired as the head coach of the Chicago Bears next year? What do we think?
Oh God, this has been a raging debate online. I think what we're seeing right now is: do you want the stability hire, like the guy that's been that has, and I know some people try and argue differently, a proven track record, or do you want the new big popular name, that hasn't been that spot but has great ideas and has shown that he has good ideas? Hard to say, because if we look at Mike Vrabel as a whole portfolio, so you've got a guy on a if you look at on face value, you see a guy that has in 6 seasons, he's only coached 6 seasons, by the way, keep in mind, he has a overall winning record in those 6 years, 54-44. He has 4 of his 6 seasons where he has winning records as well, mind you. So that also plays into it. He has, with that being said, he also, under his belt, has multiple division championships, 3 of them in a row, mind you, from 2019 to 2021 in the AFC South. 2 seasons of those were double-digit winning seasons. One of those an AFC championship berth where, for at least a half, looked like they were going to beat Kansas City, or at least be putting Kansas City on the brink, and were not considered an X factor in that playoff until they beat Tennessee. Until they beat New England in New England.
Right.
So then you look at the other side of the spectrum. So they finished 12-5 in 2021, finished second in the AFC South. We remember in 2022, they had that Sunday night football game where Jacksonville puts them on ice and kind of gets into the playoffs, and, rest is history. Jacksonville goes on, beats Justin Herbert and crew the next week. Next year, 6-11. He isn't fired. He chooses to kind of depart on separate terms with the team. And I think there's a wider discussion here. First off, he didn't have Arthur Smith. And I think it's a lot of people they cue in as like, well, Mike Vrabel's not great because once Arthur Smith left, he was garbage. I'm like, okay, sure, fair. You got to pick out the personnel. You got to get the right guy that's going to call the plays and do the job. But let me also ask you this. This is the part where I flip the script a little bit. Do we not lay some of this blame on the GM at the time for how this roster was managed post 2021? Remember, AJ Brown was supposed to get a contract.
Yep.
And they completely biffed the contract negotiations with AJ Brown. He walks out the door. That's one of the biggest sins of the last several years, is Howie Roseman basically fleecing Tennessee for AJ Brown, because they couldn't get a deal done. And Vrabel, here's the thing, Vrabel only has so much say in contract talks.
Right.
At some point I ask, how much do you lay at the blame of him for trying to manage a roster that he was given and can only take so much credit of handling himself?
Well,
I ask this. I really do.
and that roster, when he was winning, wasn't like this all-star roster, if I remember correctly. It's not like he had quarterback.
Their 2021 season, a lot of people thought that should have not been the way it was.
No, now he had his defense. He had some guys at linebacker and stuff, I believe, but it wasn't Kansas City roster-esque. It wasn't Buffalo Bills at the time. It wasn't. He got those dudes to play, and he won some close games. It was like old school Baltimore Ravens type of stuff and Patriots from back in the day. And so, and I love how they say, well, he was garbage when that guy left. It wasn't like it was 4 straight years of not having this guy and he was bad. It was 1 year. And then I just don't think Mike Vrabel and the upper management got along very well in those situations. And I think Mike Vrabel is just kind of like, I'm not putting up with this. I'm going to go. Before you fire me, I'm going to go and I'm going to kind of reset, which is fine. Like that's every guy is entitled to do so.
Mm-hmm.
So for Mike Vrabel coming in, the positives of that would be, oh my God, this guy's going to get these dudes to play. A guy that played linebacker for Bill Belichick, won a lot of games with the Patriots. He even caught passes at tight end. They put him at tight end and do stuff, like a guy that understands that.
True players coach right there, if we're being honest. So
true. And he understands more than anybody that your O-line and D-line, because he wants to run the football, he's going to understand that more than anybody. And to get the dudes to play and have some energy, yeah, that's your guy. And a guy that could come in and just kind of manage everything. He did it in Tennessee, like, hey, I'm the head coach. I'm going to let you guys do your thing, but I'm going to be there to make sure it's all going right and make sure this is going to go smoothly. So if that's what you're looking for, he's got to be at the top of the list of guy that's had NFL head coaching experience, former player, does that. Here's the downfall to that. When you hire a guy that's not going to call plays, can you trust that he's going to be able to hire somebody that's going to call defense and then call offense, and they're going to get done at a extremely high level? And then now this next part, I don't think you should base this hire off of this next part, but it's just something fans and myself think about in the NFL. If you hire 2 good guys, like Dan Campbell's about to go through this a little bit. When you bring guys in, if they get it figured out and they're doing really well, and there's a head coaching job opening, they're going to go after those guys. So then you got to constantly.
How do you fill the void?
Right. Like Nick Saban was the master at it at college. Like he was losing guys and he was the master of bringing guys in and just never losing a step in college. Bill Belichick really didn't lose coordinators. And if he did, they always came back. So he was able to kind of, like McDaniels, he leaves, but then comes back, and then they don't skip a beat when he comes back,
Right.
So that would be the next part. I'm not saying that should not be the straw of why you don't hire him, but that is something of, is he capable of hiring the right staff, which he did with Arthur Smith. Like that was proven. I don't think Mike Vrabel gave himself a chance to prove it again because of him and the management of not getting along, but that's a thing we got to think about here.
Right. I mean, look, you're hiring, if you hire Mike Vrabel, the way you're choosing Mike Vrabel because you got tired of watching Matt Eberflus mishandle in-game operations. You're not hiring coordinator coach, you're hiring a coach is what you're doing. So at that point, you are relying on then the GM and the head coach to get the right personnel in. Now, here's my spin on this. And again, it's up to Mike Vrabel, quite frankly. This is where things get iffy, is like, if you hire a guy like Mike, you then go, can we retain anyone from this? Because I'll be honest with you. I keep seeing increased better performances from this offense with Thomas Brown. I almost would wonder if you would see, if Thomas Brown, credit, he's probably thinking about opportunity, but he also seems to be a guy that these players love and respect, and he gets a lot of energy out of them. in a Mike Vrabel scenario, my ideal situation would be they retain Thomas Brown as offensive coordinator, similar to how Matt Nagy retained Vic Fangio back in 2018 when he was hired on, where they recognize, hey, there is a good coordinator on this roster. Let's not get rid of what is working right now.
Right.
And let's try and let's look at what we need to bring in that can be fixed or maintained. Because the thing is, with all the one-score games this year, I ask, what happens if you have a Mike Vrabel as a head coach today? Right now, if you had a Mike Vrabel on the sidelines today, someone that takes risks and gambles, but also is smart and savvy in the moment. We've seen this. It's not like we're forgetting that this man was a master of doing the most with the least during his tenure in Tennessee. People seem to forget that. He was a master at doing this stuff. Ryan Tannehill was the quarterback, and we're not going to say Ryan Tannehill was some freaking world beater QB. Yes, they had Derrick Henry, but you can't tell me Tennessee's defense as well was some like freaking top tier D. They freaking balanced the best of what they could find. They were situational. Mike Vrabel is a coach. He's a good situational coach. You give him pieces around him, which honestly, Chicago's roster, like besides the fact they got to invest in line, which that's up to Ryan Poles, and he knows that now. Mike Vrabel's going to probably stress that, considering I think he's going to, in any interview, I imagine his first thing he will say is, I don't want to be betrayed by my GM and my staff again. I mean, seriously, would you not go in an interview knowing what happened in 2022?
Right.
And go, yeah, I better not see that betrayal again. I need some trust that the GM is going to listen to my demands and is going to be in the best vested interest of keeping players that are necessary to my vision.
Right.
So that's why I believe him. I think he's a guy who's a great leader of men. It's going to come down to coordinators. That's the main thing. It's going to be knock. The coordinators, who you keep as a play caller, matters with Mike Vrabel. But I think in terms of a guy that has a proven track record, in my opinion, as someone that knows how to run this, like, again, you put him into a situation this year, I think Chicago is that playoff team we expected to be with a Mike Vrabel behind the headset.
100%.
So that's why I'm for it. Because if that's the only missing piece, and you can convince Mike to maybe keep on pieces that players are, interacting with well, again, hypotheticals, but in my world, that's where I see it, where it's an opportunity. But again, you're also passing up on new ideas and possible innovation with Ben Johnson, who is an unproven head coach.
Right.
So
that's why this is a unique situation. And I know we'll talk about Ben Johnson later on in the season. If they don't, they're not going to hire anybody right now, obviously, because the season's going on and everything else. I mean, they could hire Mike Vrabel since he's a consultant. They could.
And we should mention, out of the ones we're going to talk about, he's not the only one that has been ex-head coaching experience. But, I mean, he's really the only main candidate on this list I've seen people talk about that's really head coach first, and it's about making sure that his coordinators are giving him the best of what he needs to run his team efficiently.
Right. And
he's not a coordinator coach. He is a coach, period. That is what you're hiring him for.
Right. And you need a guy that would not have this locker room turmoil like a Mighty Eberflus. You need that type of person. He's going to hold him. He is like Dan Campbell. He is like a Dan Campbell. He's a coach. He is going to hold himself accountable. He is going to admit when he messes up. He is going to keep it short and simple like Bill Belichick. That's where he learned it from in his press conferences. He's going to keep everything in the locker room. He's going to have I think he is going to have respect of the players just because he played and he understands it. Not saying that a former player has to be the head coach, but it does help a little bit, especially when he has a proven track record of what he's done.
Well, understanding the locker room and how the locker room works is, I think, cannot be understated. Dan Campbell is a perfect example. And I know we talk we respect a lot of Dan Campbell on here. Like, dude, I could talk all day about Dan Campbell, and, yes, risk taker, but also understands his players, finds ways and best ways to motivate his players. But also, and this is why I like Mike Vrabel, is similar deal when Mike was at his peak during his 4-year run of winning seasons, got the best out of his players, and also, again, had his entire operation on the same page is the thing. Again, the reason it fell off the tracks, I feel is because, again, I think I think his front office betrayed him in Tennessee, and I think it was during a transitional period where they really needed a coordinator. And that's the one knock I'll give on him, is that after 2020-21, they did not find the right OC, and that really doomed them. So
Right. And
it's going to loom. That's why I feel like that's contingent on, if you keep Thomas Brown on, that makes sense. If you don't, well, that's going to get scrutinized a ton.
right.
Is the deal. It's going to get
Well,
scrutinized a lot.
that's going to be hard to do, because if there's a head coaching job opening and Thomas Brown wants to go for it and they decide to hire, like, and then if you're Thomas Brown, like, you are the interim head coach, somebody comes in and is now the head coach, it's probably hard to say, okay, I'll take a back seat to you because it's whatever. I know he's not the head coach right now, but he kind of is right now, right? Like, he technically is. That's really hard to now. Maybe Mike Vrabel maybe he could say, hey, you know what? I will help you get a job. Like, if you stay here, here's my blueprint. Here's what I think we can do. And maybe it is possible. But if there's head coaching jobs open out there, even if there's OC jobs open out there, and he thinks, those type of things. So that it's not an impossible scenario. I think that'd be an awesome scenario to have.
Yeah.
But I think it's hard to have an interim head coach for 4 or 5 weeks, be the guy, and then all of a sudden they bring somebody else in. Like, is he going to think, oh, the organization thinks I can't do it, or everything else? But Mike Vrabel could sit there and say, hey, I will help you call plays. You're in charge of this. I'm just going to I'll be the motivational guy, make sure we're all in the right position. And maybe Mike Vrabel can say, hey, I'll prepare you for a lot of things. I'll prepare you for interviews. I'll prepare you for this. And so you will get a job. So that is possible. And then we got to trust Mike Vrabel is able to hire the right guys after that happens, right? So I'd be for it if they hired him. Like, a lot of the names that we'll talk about, I'm okay with a lot of them. Some, you're like, but Mike Vrabel, I think there's more positive than there is any sort of negative. And like you said, the biggest piece is going to be he got the most out of that Tennessee team. And if he were to come to Chicago, they add a couple more pieces of what they have, and make sure he hires the right quarterback coach guy. If it's not Thomas Brown, if it's not Thomas Brown, because I think Thomas Brown can connect with Caleb Williams. If Thomas Brown were to leave and you hire an offensive coordinator, make sure that guy can really coach up Caleb Williams, or hire a quarterback coach along with the OC that can really help this guy out, or bring in a consultant or bring in an analyst that can really talk to him and get this going. But Mike Vrabel would be a good pick. There's more positives than negatives. And I think with that roster, he'll get the most out of it.
Well, and here's the thing that I'm excited for if you were to pick Mike. I would argue this is probably the most talented roster he would ever have in his tenure since being at the helm. And again, this is no offense to the Titans teams he was helming over his 6-year tenure, but I mean, I'll be frank, like they caught lightning in a bottle when they went to the AFC Championship game years ago, and it was great. And it led them to 2 straight 10-win seasons. But I'm gonna be honest with you, I look at this roster the Bears have, and that's what people talk about, is like, this is a roster that's ready to win right now, has what I think is a quarterback with more upward momentum than what Ryan Tannehill ever had, by the way. I just don't see how, again, a guy who has been known for his career getting the most out of the least could not sit in, find the right OC, and get something out of it. Again, you need competency right there is what Vrabel brings to you, is the deal. I still think there's an argument to be said, and I think the reason why he's talked so much and why this debate is raging is because people do realize Vrabel is a guy that's going to be a top candidate. Like, he took a year off. He went to Cleveland. Cleveland's its own thing, but he went to try and help assist with that mess. And I think he's trying to evaluate what his options are. And I think he's going to get requested a lot as a guy that's going to get interviews. And I think he should be one of the top 3 candidates Chicago talks to, because he does lean into that one side of things. So,
right.
Yeah. Good start. Vrabel definitely has made it a stir online about this debate, but it's because you see the pieces that are the good pieces of what he did. You can't ignore that. Like, again, you just wondered what the hypothetical is with a better roster, what he could do with that.
Right. So I think we're both okay with the Mike Vrabel hire. And,
Yeah.
you know,
I would not be ticked off if they hired him.
no.
But I can see why people would be mad only because they, I think, want something to be completely game changer, break the mold 100%. So, yeah, it would not be a miss. Like, it wouldn't be a Matt Eberflus hire. Matt Eberflus was a lame duck. He was a lame duck hire.
Yes.
He was always
Yes.
considered that. People thought it was a weird hire when he was hired back then. This would not be weird. I think people think Mike Vrabel is going to get hired this coaching cycle. I would not be shocked if Chicago is the place he goes.
Right. And
so he's got to be a top candidate. I just don't see any other way.
And being like a tough coach, like a Dan Campbell, I think fits the Bears' identity mold perfectly if he were to come in. So, and again, we keep comparing to the Lions how they tore it down and rebuilt it, but they did with like the old line. But they also did it with a guy that could like relate to players, and that was Dan Campbell. Who, there's a video when Dan Campbell did his first press conference. He's like, "We're going to fall down, we're going to get up, and we're going to bite kneecaps on the way up." I remember Stephen A. Smith saying he should be fired for that comment. Like, who makes those comments? And it's like,
I mean, it's amazing how different things are now than they were 3 years ago.
Well, I remember that press conference came out. Everybody was like, "Oh my God, who they hire? Oh my God, oh my God." And I remember watching it going, "No, I love this. Like, I absolutely love it." And I'm like, "Oh my God, if he can get the Lions to play like that, watch out." And like, look where they are now. So it's like, Mike Vrabel would be that type of dude. Is like, we're gonna hit you. We're gonna hit you hard. We're gonna do things the right way. We're gonna yeah, like I remember when his name first got brought up in the back of my mind, like, really? But then once you start to think back and look at what he did, you're like, oh, okay, yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I look at a guy that, like I said, I know there's been other people like, well, he didn't handle Malik Willis well. I was like, I don't know, dude. Malik Willis, I still ain't buying on that fully. But like I said, I see a guy that has a winning record, was an AP coach of the year, and was able to manage a roster that at times was beaten up to like a pulp with medical issues, or was getting the best out of who they brought on. Again, Ryan Tannehill. Ryan Tannehill had a solid career, but you can't tell me Ryan Tannehill was at any time in his career in Tennessee this like top 10, like, oh my God, he's lighting the league on fire QB. And they have a running game, and Mike Vrabel likes to run old school ground game as well. He's a guy that's like the older school, like establish the principles and do the fundamentals the best way possible, and you're going to win games.
Right.
So I like it for that aspect. I think if they don't talk to him, that's a disservice to the coaching search. He needs to be one of the top candidates on the board that Kevin Warren and Ryan Poles are hunting down.
Right.
Don't hold any personal grudges. I don't know if there shouldn't be anything like a Jim Harbaugh scenario, but like, look, he's not controversial. He's got a good track record. He took a year off. Talk to the man.
Right.
That's my advice. Like, he needs to be on the board. Do not make some silly excuse to wipe a guy aside. This is a guy that needs to be on your big board at the top, along with like a Ben Johnson or an Aaron Glenn or like a Brian Flores, like up there. That's what it has to be. He needs to be on the top there.
Right.
So
100%.